Welcome to the Fat Fueled Family Podcast, where every week Danny and Maura Vega discuss topics that help families live a healthy and active lifestyle with their little ones, including nutrition and training, peaceful parenting, education, and mindset. To stay up to date, make sure to hit subscribe on this podcast and check out the blog at www.fatfueled.family. You can also find them on Facebook and Instagram at DannyVega.ms, at FatFueledMom, and at FatFueledKids, and Fat Fueled Family on YouTube. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Fat Fueled Family Podcast. I'm your host, Danny Vega, and I'm joined by my wife, Maura. How are you today, my love?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm a little
You've seen
frazzled.
better days.
Yeah, ever since this morning, I just a lot of stressful, just little stupid stuff, things that get under your skin.
You're in a funk.
Yeah.
It happens.
Well, it's just, like issues with software. Like I have specific timelines for everything that I want to do.
Yeah, it's frustrating.
And then I get knocked off my timeline and then, or whatever.
It's frustrating.
That's life just testing my
your patience.
And I'm not that good. So
that's how it goes.
But we don't want to waste any time, and we want to continue our cannabis series. And this is week 3. We're going to be joined by Chef Brandon Allen. Brandon is a professionally trained chef and the first ever High Times top cannabis chef, specializing in paleo and ketogenic cuisine. As a certified interpener. Interpener. This is a great term. It's best described as the sommelier of cannabis. He's able to determine cannabis flower quality and effects based on visual and aromatic inspection. Fascinated by the endocannabinoid system, Brandon continually researches the science and history of cannabis in order to educate the masses on the amazing medicinal properties of cannabis phytochemicals. After experiencing a monumental lifestyle transformation and being reintroduced to cannabis as a medicine, he discovered the amazing parallels of cannabinoid supplementation and nutritional ketosis, and has determined a theory that he feels will help change the lives of countless people. We're super excited to dive into this topic. So welcome to the show, Chef Brandon Allen. What's up, man?
Hey, thanks so much for having me. Great to be here.
Oh, man, we're excited because we have not seen anyone talk about this stuff, like the parallels between ketosis and cannabis.
I know, I love it.
Just your level of education. I loved your talk, which, by the way, we're going to put on our show notes
Awesome.
that you posted on your YouTube. But we're super excited to dive into this stuff because you have a very unique perspective.
I would say so. I haven't heard anyone talking about it as well, but what's interesting is that there's a lot of people that are experiencing cannabis and ketosis together, but they might not completely understand how and why their body is reacting the way they are and what's happening physiologically, biologically, and even emotionally because of the parallels between cannabis and ketosis.
Right. Yeah, that's so true. And I can't wait to dive into all of this. I'm so excited. And so let's just go for it. So what is the most critical problem you're currently trying to solve?
Misinformation.
Yeah, that's great.
Mic drop.
Yeah,
I love it.
It's that simple. It
is that simple.
So fortunately, but unfortunately, we live in a time where everyone has access to everything immediately. If your internet's slow, you're angry about it. But the reality is, like, we have access to so much information, but information doesn't necessarily always mean that it's true and correct and based off of science. And we have, podcasts like the one that we're on right now, and you guys have had many others, and there are, I can't even imagine how many are being recorded and live as we're speaking, where there are people talking about various opinions, and then there's people that are talking about facts. And I feel that a lot of people, they don't understand the difference, that, facts don't care about your feelings and opinions aren't factual. And there's a difference between a hypothesis, a theory, and definitive science. And all that's kind of just gotten mushed together. And my whole goal is to be able to talk about cannabis factually, to be able to talk about things like the ketogenic diet factually, and have an open-mindedness that I want to be proven wrong. So if anything that I say today is not accurate and someone disagrees with, okay, well, I want to know how and why you came to that conclusion, and I want to see the data to back it up. not just, oh, I don't believe in that because I like carbs.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and by being wrong, it's an opportunity to grow and to learn. And all I care about is the science and data that's out there, because that's ultimately you can't argue with it. So that's what I'm trying to combat misinformation and utilize, as a chef, food as my vessel to lure people in and educate them about cannabis and low carb, carnivore, ketogenic style lifestyles. And then also on the flip side, utilize cannabis as the vessel to lure people in and educate them about food and nutrition and cooking.
I love that. That is
Genius.
like so genius and such a perfect combination of things. And I love that you said misinformation, because we've always been, those people like,
Questioners. Yeah.
like
Question things.
everyone in our family knows it. They're used to us by this point, they just roll their eyes and we're like, yeah, we're
We
only
don't
getting weirder,
accept
guys.
conventional
Let's
wisdom.
go.
Yeah.
Let's do it. And so, yeah. And so we've just seen how, misinformation, it's everywhere. And the internet just makes that so much worse, really.
Yeah.
Yep.
And at the same time, it opens up the door for be able to check their facts. And
Exactly.
I guess, aside from trying to combat misinformation, I think the other problem that I'm trying to solve, or maybe trying to motivate people to prevent the problem from happening in the first place, which is getting people to understand that they have to take responsibility for what they consume. And by that, I don't just mean the food that they're consuming, the medicine that they're consuming, but the information that they're consuming. So take responsibility for your life, for your lifestyle, take responsibility for your diseases, take responsibility for your inabilities, and realize that you can change all of these things based off of what you're consuming physically as well as through your education. So, and that goes to taking responsibility for checking the facts, and before you just believe something to be true, find some resources, find some alternative resources, and question everything. So combating misinformation and irresponsibility would be my whole MO. So
I love it, man. And it's one of those things that is easy to do when you don't agree with it, but it's harder to do when you agree with it, because we kind of separate ourselves into communities. Like we're in this, keto community, we're in this cannabis community, and, everybody's all on board with the benefits, and it becomes much harder. And I think I totally agree with you there okay, a new study came out that, says such and such. Okay, well, let's see what other studies that are looking at the same thing that had, reproducible results. Or let's look at, did they identify the mechanism of action? Like, why is this happening? All these things can help us have a better, deeper understanding. And unfortunately, we don't do it, but hopefully, we try to do that, so that when people are consuming information, whether it's a podcast or, a YouTube video, we try to do that. We try to give both sides, like it happens all the time. One example will be like, you can't lose muscle on a ketogenic diet. Well, yeah, you can if you don't eat enough protein, it's totally possible. There's all these different things. Yeah.
And you can also maintain it and gain it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's where, one of my biggest things that I talk about is consumption determines function. So what you consume that with, how you're consuming it, how often you're consuming it, what the dose is, or how much you're actually consuming, is ultimately going to determine how you are going to function. So you can look at that majorly from that came to be more on the cannabis aspect, but on the food and nutrition and keto and low carb and protein and fats and all these things that goes from there. It works on that spectrum, but really it's the entourage of those two things together that ultimately determines how you're going to function. So, within the cannabis industry, and I'll preface this, that I love cannabis. I love everything about it, the good and the bad, but I also love the science that's out there. However, there's a huge difference between the science that's out there that's done in vitro, so in a petri dish or a test tube or a non-living organism, and an in vivo study, so in a living organism or a mammal of sorts, a rodent, a rat, whatever the subject may be. And then there's a huge difference between studies that are done in mice and rats and monkeys versus what's actually done in a living, breathing human being. So right now there's a lot of studies out there, and I'm doing like the quotation things with my hands right now. There's a lot of studies out there that they're talking about, okay, so cannabinoids have shown to induce apoptosis, so natural programmed cell death, where they kill the bad cells and leave the healthy ones alone. It's like, well, that's great, but it happened in a test tube. So you can't then go out and say cannabis cures cancer. Right. It's like, okay, well, there's research to show that whatever cannabinoid at what specific dose did provoke this effect, but let's dive a little bit deeper and look at the reality of how many milligrams of THC or CBD or whatever cannabinoid they're utilizing in the research would you need through a digestion or through inhalation to have these effects. And then let's look at the cancer cell. What type of cancer, what type of tissue did it come from? Was it in a male or a female? How old were they? What was their DNA like? What's their genetics like? So there's so many different layers to what is considered a study or what is considered a science right now. And that's something where misinformation is running rampant in the cannabis industry, because people are taking a lot of these, quote, studies that are done and they're making human claims for them. And it's like, it doesn't work that way. And then on the flip side, you look at like the research that's being done on the ketogenic diet, and it's being done in living, breathing human beings. And the same person that's over here saying cannabis cures cancer, if you tell them to drop the carbs and up their fat, they're going to be like, oh, no, that's nonsense. That doesn't work. That's a trend.
So funny. Absolutely.
Or they're saying go vegan because plants and all this different stuff. And it's like, you're defying evolution and science, and like, insulting our ancestors by saying going vegan is like the healthiest thing in the world. Now a ketogenic vegan, maybe that's supplementing properly with EPA, maybe we can talk about that. But, I personally am a product of all the things that I don't want to say I despise, but I definitely shake my head at because I used to be vegan because my sister decided to go vegan, and she's like, "Oh, it's better." I was like, "Oh, okay."
Oh, so we've all done it. I did it in college.
You know what gets me, Brandon, man?
I felt horrible.
That's frustrating. It's that my wife and I both, like, we're all into the yoga. We're all into, we love cannabis. We think it's a great option. We think there's lots of benefits. And then like we get there and the people are super cool and everything. And then
until we get to the meat.
Then everybody wants to hate us when we pull out our steaks and like, they
want to hit me with the plant base. I'm like, no.
Hold up, guys. Yeah. Like, can we just do yoga and eat burgers and steaks?
I need a burger,
We can do those. I can be a peaceful carnivore.
Exactly. And it's pretty much, well, without diving into politics, I'm going to briefly, but just as an example, the identity politics that we're experiencing right now of the polarization, which is like, I have, colleagues that are on the complete opposite side of the spectrum of me politically, and we talk every day, we laugh every day, and we are best of friends. And that's okay. You're allowed to disagree. And I also have followers on my Instagram that follow me, even though every, 4 or 5 photos is a delicious medium rare steak. So it's like there can be this balance without alienating people or trying to constantly push an agenda. It's like, I wish people could realize that we can get along at 50%. Like, it doesn't have to be
totally.
It doesn't have to be 100. It doesn't have to be 90. Like, let's just like do our best to be able to rub shoulders in public without trying to kill each other, because we disagree over your protein source or your preferred medicine.
Exactly.
Yeah, man. And it's funny because we like, the good thing about my wife and I is that we're so out there on so many things that there's very little chance of people agreeing with us anyway. So
at this point, we're like, we'll take any friends we can get.
We're complete anarchists. we are political atheists. We don't believe in politics.
We're such weirdos. We homeschool.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm always telling my kids, I'm like, hey,
not even homeschool, we unschool.
Yeah. I'm like, you don't want the cops coming because you guys are screaming, because once they find out we're homeschoolers too, forget it. We're like super weird.
Well,
all right. You know what I want to do, man? Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just say that's great, because we fortunately live in a country where you can do that, and that's true freedom. And I support that, and I think that you're allowed to, as long as you're not causing harm on anyone else. Then you do you.
Exactly.
All right, let's talk about weed and meat.
Yeah. So I wanted you to start because you have definitely a pretty checkered past when it comes to like your health. So I wanted to have you walk us through the process of your health issues, and then discovering the ketogenic diet, and then, as you said, rediscovering cannabis, because like you said, it was younger years. Obviously, you weren't out there with a beaker and some test tubes, like doing research. You're just recreational.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I am 33 years old. I'll be 34 in October. Since I was 9, I've experienced back pain, and years later, I found out that they were testing me for scoliosis by having me bend over and look at my back one way. But really, all they had to do is turn me sideways and realize that I have decreased lordosis, which means my lower spine basically kind of goes dead straight down. I don't have that curvature that goes in towards my belly button and then out at my butt. So because of that, that has caused joint pain and issues ever since. Like I said, I've been 9 years old and complaining about back pain and going to the doctor, and they're like, "Oh, it's growing pains. You'll be okay." And throughout my late teens and my 20s, I was not exactly living the healthiest lifestyle. I was into sports and stuff in my early teens, but after 7 knee dislocations and broken wrists and broken this and broken that, my body was just not that great. And because of the back issues, I wasn't able to really recover the way I should have. And I also take responsibility on not following through with the physical therapy like I should have. And then you combine that with poor lifestyle decisions like drinking excessively, smoking 3 packs of cigarettes a day for 6 years, eating whatever was in front of me. Like I just got, at that point, it's like I'm painting this picture of the typical American, to be honest with you. Like if you were to stereotype it in that ill of a way, I mean, there you have it, and interpret it however you like. But in my, I guess it was like 23 or 24, I decided to quit smoking. 2 days later, I went vegan. So you want to talk about a change? I didn't know if I was craving tar or cheese, but it was at that point in my life. Yeah, at that point in my life,
that's so funny.
Positive change. I lost about 50 pounds over the course of about a year and a half, 2 years. I lost a significant amount of weight, but I was still eating high carb because of when I was vegan, and I was still drinking and whatnot. But I looked better, so I thought that I was healthier. Then I started to fall in love with food, and because I was vegan, I had to cook, and I had to learn how to work with ingredients that I just couldn't go out and eat fast food. And that's really actually what got me into food and into cooking. I ended up deciding to end my veganism because I fell in love with food more than I was actually in love with the idea of vegan. And like Anthony Bourdain is definitely one of the biggest influences in making that happen. And if you read his books and you hear or you read about what he thinks about veganism and vegetarianism, that had a lot to do with the shift, but it was also just the love of food. So I went to culinary school at the Art Institute of Pittsburgh, and while I was in school, I had a really unique opportunity to create my own apprenticeship with a chef on the Olympic culinary team that is a certified master chef. So while I was in school getting my basic education, I had this like master's degree worth of knowledge I was gaining from him at the same time. And due to my back issues, I knew that working in a kitchen until I was 60 years old, working 60 to 80 hours a week and killing myself on the line was just not in the cards for me.
Yeah.
So when I finished school, I was more focused on like the food and beverage side. So I was doing some work with various companies, so like Whole Foods and Sprouts and Natural Grocers and different things with product demonstrations and recipes. And it's like, yeah, I was still around food and I was making a living and things were working, but at the end of the day, I wasn't really cooking as much. And then I moved to Colorado. My girlfriend, Megan, we've been together for over 5 years. She's a nurse and she signed up with a traveling nursing agency. And we get to Colorado and I was essentially introduced to cannabis, to marijuana as a legal recreational product. And, you know, I was smoking when I was younger, but I was just getting high with friends, watching Half Baked over and over and, you know, Step Brothers and stuff like that, you know, and then it was like, well, I started consuming edibles and, you know, I was still drinking and not eating very healthy. I put all the weight back on after I was done being vegan. And, you know, I was just getting high. Then we moved to Texas for a few months for an assignment and don't get caught with drugs in Texas. So I didn't consume anything. But that is when I was introduced to the ketogenic diet. And I was doing product demonstrations for a company called Sir Kensington's. And they do condiments and whatnot. And they have like avocado oil and things. And this one of the reps in the area was telling me. We love
them.
Awesome. They're delicious. Yeah. This guy was telling me about this keto diet. And I went over to his house to have a drink. And his roommate was eating mayonnaise out of the jar.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, what the fuck?
Some of those Sir Kensington sauces, though.
Okay, so yeah,
like that special sauce. I'll eat that maybe
for sure. They are that delicious. But that's how I was introduced to this diet.
Yeah, it was a shock.
So you want to talk about misinformation? This guy is telling me that to do this diet, you literally have to
vegetable oils.
Yeah. He's like eating. Just I was like, what is going on here? And I was like, screw that. And I went back to my tacos and pizza and whatnot. So I finally hit my point of like, well, I'm fat again. I'm 215 pounds, which is my definition of fat. I was 50 pounds overweight. And you know, if anyone's offended by saying fat, maybe you should just get over it. Okay. I was overweight and it was not healthy and my body was compromised. So that's unhealthy. So I don't care what you want to call it. It's your body's compromised. So,
no bueno.
So I tried to go vegan again and I gained more weight. And I was like, what the hell is going on? So I finally started doing some research and I'm looking up paleo. I'm like, okay, paleo makes sense. I get it, but there's no science. Like it just doesn't, you can't eat a whole platter of sweet potato casserole. And just because there's maple syrup instead of sugar, it doesn't like, how is that good? You know? So then I started looking up this keto thing and I was reading about it and I realized that if you do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 happens. It's that simple. It's a formula.
Yep.
It is a science because if you alter your intake, your body goes into a metabolic shift, which changes how you burn energy and create energy output. And if you do this, you can burn your stored fat, which is normally starvation ketosis, but you can eat in certain ways that you are burning fat that you're consuming while burning fat that you have stored at the same time. I was like, wow, this makes perfect sense to me. So I started keto. And in the next 6 months or so, I lost about 30 pounds effortlessly. And as a chef, being told that I got to eat avocados, bacon, protein, some leafy greens, and eggs and stuff. Oh, and more bacon every day, and butter and sour cream and all these different things and cheese. I was like, holy crap, this is like a chef's dream. I just, instead of throwing it on bread, I'm skipping the bread and I'm getting creative with cauliflower and other low carb type of vegetables and whatnot. And then I hit a plateau and that's when I moved to Los Angeles. And this is when I got there on like a Friday in like August of 16, I guess it was. And on Monday, I had my med card. And anyone who's listening in California before they went rec, if you stubbed your toe and had $45, you could get a med card. It's that simple. There's no like medical marijuana program. It's just it's a way to kind of cut corners, and that's a whole other topic. But so my $45 later, I came in with like x-rays of my back and like all these things from doctors. And before I even explained like what was going on, the doctor's like signing the papers. It was a joke. But that Monday I got edibles, and I was microdosing with edibles. And over the next couple of weeks, I realized that I started losing weight again. And my plateau was no longer. And the only thing that had changed is I started consuming cannabis on a regular basis. So as a chef and as a keto chef, I was really disappointed with the really crappy quality edibles that you find in a quote medical marijuana dispensary.
Yeah,
it's like
that's what I know. I always tell Danny too. Like I'm like, even if I do go to Colorado, I don't want your crappy gummies.
Well, there's a very, very limited amount of like, there was one chocolate that I've seen, and this is from
because it's all
going
like
to dispensaries
wheat,
in Cali and dispensaries in Colorado. And there's this one chocolate that's pretty good. It's a dark chocolate, and it has like 2 grams of carbs per serving. So I think it's 2 squares, and it's like 2 grams of carbs, 1 gram of
that's not too
sugar.
bad.
Nice.
And then the whole bar is 10.
That's not bad.
Is that
so it's 20 grams.
Yeah, but it's a stretch.
Was that Kiva?
Kiva, man, you know what? I don't remember.
Was it like a brown paper bag type of really elegant, but that type of color packaging?
No, this one was actually like small and white and long, kind of like a miniature chocolate bar. Okay. I mean, it was good, but like you said, that's it, man. Yeah. And because like for me, if I'm gonna have cannabis, I'm not gonna eat sugar. That's just not in line with what I'm trying to do. I'm not gonna eat a cookie, right? And why am I having cannabis in the first place? Well, maybe it's to calm down, to sleep better, or whatever. So I'm not gonna be consuming sugar right before bed. So you're right, man. It's hard out there.
Yeah. So I was really frustrated with the fact that, I'm looking at this as something medicinal. Don't get me wrong. I love getting high, and I have no problem with people who say, I don't care if it's a medicine. I love getting high. Good for you. You have the right to do that. And everyone should have the right to do that. So I don't want anyone listening thinking I'm being all pretentious, like, oh, I only consume this as medicine. Fuck no. I love getting high, and that's that. So
I love it.
But it just so happens to have medicinal benefits. And you can't say that about alcohol. You can't say that about sugar. You can't say that about all these other things. So that's what's great about it. It's like it provides a euphoric sensation, and humans have been intoxicating ourselves since the existence of our being. And it's probably even before that with our previous ancestors and who we've, come from, have been eating things in the wild that alter your senses and your perception of reality. So good for you. Go and enjoy it. But hey, it's a medicine as well. So, but I started realizing that these edibles were shit, and I was wanting to learn how to cook with my own cannabis oil and butters or ghee, actually, and different things like that. So I watched some YouTube videos. I learned how to make my own. And then what I realized is that I'm a chef, and I know the difference between a nicely marbled ribeye steak, a ripe tomato, and really pungent rosemary. But when it came to cannabis, I had no idea what quality meant. And if you go into a dispensary and you say, hey, what's the best quality thing you have? Someone says, oh, this one's 30% THC. This shit's fire. It's like,
that's
like, all right,
okay.
Well, but that doesn't teach me anything. So I started doing research on trying to identify cannabis quality. And that is what led me to a company called Trichome Institute. And Trichome Institute created the Sommelier of Cannabis program called Interpening. And I took the course. At that point was what they call the level 1 and level 2 course. I took it as a combo. I got certified as an interpener. And what interpening is a methodology that allows you to be able to identify flower quality and predict the psychotropic effects based off of its physical and aromatic characteristics. Now, I didn't just take this course. I'm actually now partnered with Trichome Institute and have helped them recently redevelop their curriculum. So trichomeinstitute.com, you can actually take our professional interpening course online. And we are also in the process of redeveloping the next level courses. We have a course as well called Cannabis Products and Sales Training for anyone who wants to better understand cannabis from a consumer as well as from like a bud tender or consultant retail level. And we have a book that's coming out, and as well as tools. So just check out the website and our Instagram. But going back to, my whole progression here, Once I understood the quality, I then started cooking with it more, and my weight loss got down another 20 pounds. So here I am, 50 pounds down, eating high fat, low carb, and smoking weed. And that I saw this happen. So then I wanted to understand why. So I started researching more about cannabis. And I'm reading all these medical reviews, and I'm reading these, hands in the air quote studies. And it's a lot of generic information. It's a lot of very kind of misleading. Some stuff is very cherry picked when you look at the data. And then I started diving deeper into, in vitro studies, and as well as human studies, and just kind of like taking everything with a grain of salt. But I started seeing these amazing parallels between cannabis supplementation and the ketogenic diet, because every time I read about keto, I'm like, here's some buzzwords or buzz phrases or receptors that they're talking about. And then I'm reading about cannabinoids over here, and I'm seeing the same thing. For example, the CB receptor, cannabinoid receptors. So we have there's CB1 and CB2. The health and wellness and like the foundation of the cell membrane where the receptor lies is based off of omega-3 DHA. I'm like,
amazing.
Incredible.
That's interesting. So that's a really, really important fat for our brain, but it's also a really important fat for the endocannabinoid system, but for the ketogenic diet. So that's one thing that I'd see. And then I, dove a little further, and I see, okay, well, if you're in ketosis, you have lower inflammatory markers, and cannabinoids aid in inflammation. Okay, seems very simple, but it's a nice little parallel there. And then diving into more about homeostasis. The whole point of the endocannabinoid system is to achieve homeostatic balance. It's to keep your body in check. It's what is working throughout various other systems or receptors throughout your entire body. And then you look at the ketogenic diet and you see all the proven medicinal benefits, both physically, and I kind of separate these I think it's easier for people to digest, physically and then mentally, even though really it's all the same. It's all a physical thing that's happening in these reactions, but you see how people can help with and nearly cure, or at least minimize symptoms of depression, going on in the ketogenic diet, of anxiety. Mm-hmm. You start reading about people with neurodegenerative diseases, with Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, epilepsy. And then you get even deeper into things like diabetes and cancer, and like really, really crippling disorders, MS, Parkinson's. I mean, the list goes, Yep, the list goes on and on and on. So every time that I would read a study about the ketogenic diet, I would then see all these diseases: stress, respiratory disease, arthritis, reproduction issues, restless leg, schizophrenia, Tourette's, menstrual cramps, kidney failure, migraines. I have a list here I'm reading off. Yeah. Every single thing that I just explained, plus many more, you can read about cannabinoids and cannabinoid supplementation helping with. So then I kind of dug a little bit deeper, and I found really interesting things like the Otto Warburg effect, which is explaining how we can essentially inhibit cancer cells from multiplying by not providing them with the fuel. So if you minimize glucose and you're giving them ketones, they cannot thrive off of that because they get stuck evidently in this, like,
you starve them, right?
Yeah, this lactic acid fermentation cycle, I guess is what he calls it, that where they're just like gobbling glucose. And then you start hearing a lot of anecdotal, and there's research that's being done in Israel right now about cannabis and cancer. And it's like, wait a minute. So what if you combine these two therapies together and you can inhibit this from getting worse, or at least minimize side effects from different things, or maybe cure. I hate that C word because it's very,
I know.
It's a tough one,
but it's touchy.
Yeah.
But it's
like, are you able to do that? Can you starve cancer cells over here, and then you can induce apoptosis over there? So then I really got into the last bit of this that really got me excited, and there's more to dive into, but But the next biggest thing were PPAR receptors, peroxisome proliferator activator receptors. And I'm reading about these receptors with with cannabinoids, and these receptors help regulate energy homeostasis, and they do other things. There's different subtypes, there's different families. I guess it's the gamma receptor is the one that cannabinoids. Yep, they activate. And I'm reading about gamma receptors, and the two of the biggest things that popped out were, one, the activation of this receptor increases glucose metabolism, and the next thing would be that it increases gene expression for fat burning. And when I read that, I was like, well, that explains why my plateau at 30 pounds then turned into 50. And once I started consuming cannabis with the ketogenic diet combined, how I got over that hump and I got thinner and thinner and stronger, and not to mention the cognitive abilities and the enhancement there. So there are definitely other parallels, but for the sake of time, I don't want to dive too much or kind of overdo it with people that may be listening, because I'm not a doctor, I'm not a physical therapist, I'm not a nutritionist, a medical expert, or anything like that. Right. Everything that I'm explaining to you guys, I had to teach myself. I mean, I would read a medical journal and it would take me a week to get through, because I had to continuously look up a word, open up a tab. And now I'm down a rabbit hole trying to understand what that means and then what this means over here. So this is like 2+ years in the making of me just, I'm a chef with a 2-year culinary degree, and I'm used to reading cookbooks, and now I'm reading science journals and talking about cell activation and all that. So I don't want to say that I'm the expert in this, because I'm learning from other experts and I'm kind of piecing things together. And I also acknowledge that correlation doesn't mean causation. So just because I can connect the dots between what happens with cannabis over here and what happens with ketosis over there, it doesn't mean that everything I'm saying is what it is, because there's no research on this. But how cool would it be to be able to be a part of setting up some studies, some case studies or clinical trials or something in the future where we're combining cannabinoid supplementation and a ketogenic diet, even possibly utilizing exogenous ketones at the same time, to be able to help people get over whatever hump it is that they can't do, or for whatever reason they choose not to do because it's more difficult. And we might be able to provide a solution that is easier, which, sometimes the easier way out isn't the best, but if it's going to help people and then give them the motivation to then take better responsibility for their health, I'm all about that. So it'd be really cool to be a part of that in the future.
Absolutely. And I love that that's what it's all about. Like taking our health into our own hands. Unfortunately, that's how it's got to be. And
goes back to that misinformation thing.
It goes back to the misinformation thing. You can't really even blame people sometimes, for the vegan thing and all that. It's just being completely shoved down our throats daily. And so this is how we've been educated. So it's just so important to do that. And then just share, we're not medical professionals, but it's just pointing people in a direction of, hey, look, this is what I've learned, and here's the good sources, and passing along the information. So that's awesome. Can you, cause you had an awesome 30-day experiment that you did. Can you go into a little bit of the detail and specifics, on that, and how you've continued to evolve your thought process ever since?
Sure. It was 2 years ago, April. So it was April of 2017 that I decided I was going to do a hyper strict ketogenic diet. And by that, I mean following, more traditional macros of the very high fat, moderate protein, low carb. I quit drinking for a month, which in my post 18 years old, 17 years old, adulthood, I have never done before. So I took 30 days off from alcohol. And I also started consuming not just my regular THC, but I started consuming CBD as well, which you'd be surprised how many people don't consume CBD with THC, and you need the two together. And I can dive into that more if you'd like.
Oh yeah.
But
yeah.
you need the two together. Otherwise, you need incredible, massive amounts of CBD by itself. So I consume the two together. So I'm expanding upon my entourage effect. I'm creating my own entourage effect based off of the food that I'm consuming and not adding toxins and negative things into my body. And I basically, that was the foundation to it. It was strict keto, no drinking, cannabinoid supplementation. And I documented my month, and I think I ended up losing like an additional 10 to 15 pounds. That was kind of like the end all of the 50 pounds. And I never felt better in my entire life. I had like a V at my hips all of a sudden. And I was like, damn, I was like feeling good. I had awesome energy. Mentally, I was solid. And, that was a major transformation for sure. Now, since then, I still 100% believe in and I don't know if I can call this a theory yet, whether it is just a hypothesis or whatnot, but for anyone listening, a hypothesis is an idea. And a theory is, okay, well, let's take that idea and duplicate it a couple times over and over. And then it becomes a theory. And then science is where other people can then duplicate your data over and over and over and over and consistently within a spectrum maintain those results and get the same results. So I don't know if just my experience of this, if it qualifies as a theory or not, but one of the things that I did change from my original theory, the ultimate state for the human body is to be in ketosis while supplementing the endocannabinoid system with cannabis. Well, I've altered that a little bit to be the ultimate state for the human body is to be in an intermittent state of nutritional ketosis while supplementing the endocannabinoid system with phytocannabinoids or phytonutrients from this plant. Intermittent, I think, is huge because I'm sure you guys have read about some of the long-term or lack thereof long-term studies of a ketogenic diet.
Right.
I think that when people think keto, it's like you can be in ketosis 3 or 4 days a week and then get out and come back in, or understand that throughout the day you're actually in and out of it regularly. And there's a difference between keto for weight loss versus keto for muscle gain versus keto for maintaining. So intermittent is huge. And then the other thing is supplement. It's supplementing the endocannabinoid system. Supplement means your whole goal is to help bring you to par. It's to take you in a state where you're deficient in something and bring you to where you need to be. And what most people don't understand about cannabis is there are negative side effects. Yes, it is addicting. Don't tell me that weed's not addicting if sugar, video games, porn, and gambling are addicting. Okay. So there are,
well, especially if you're like at nighttime and you get so much relief from it, and then when you run out, you're like, crap. I mean, you're obviously worse off than you were before. It's not a physical addiction, but you definitely you get those benefits, and then you miss out on them, and you're like, crap. I want those benefits back.
Yeah, and the big difference is there's not going to be negative like withdrawal side effects. Like you can die from not having it. My girlfriend's a nurse. They have beers at the hospital that they have to give people scheduled that are going through withdrawal. When you have someone that's like going through withdrawal from opioids and things like that or heroin, this is not just like you stop. Maybe you don't sleep as well for a couple of nights because you're used to being stoned, and then you're good to go. Like, no, it's not.
They need to be hospitalized.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they have to go to a detox.
So that's the big thing is, yes, there are negative side effects. And, for example, severe anxiety, which I actually get now from it out of nowhere. That suddenly happened. Paranoia. You have people with PTSD that can consume, and one cultivar could help one person's PTSD, and the exact same thing could put someone into a flare-up. And next thing you know, they're out of their mind. And then there's things like cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome, which is a severe nausea, diarrhea, vomiting type of thing that people can get dehydrated from, and they can actually die. And there have been cases of death from it. So
interesting.
So I talk about these things, and people get so angry at me because I don't have this like cure-all, like miracle molecule,
rose-colored.
Exactly. Yeah. And that to me is not how we're going to end prohibition. We're going to end prohibition by talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly, And we're going to prevent the ugly and the bad by talking about it so people are aware of it and they're educated of how to not get there in the first place, but supplement's key. So going back to what I said in the beginning, which is consumption determines function. If you are going to consume to the point, and there is research on this, that your CB receptors start diminishing, your cell membrane, the receptor sinks into it so the cannabinoids can't dock, or once it does dock, nothing happens. The cascade of reactions and the signaling of proteins and all these things, like they doesn't happen because you desensitize your receptors. So if you're consuming to the point where that's happening, like how is that a good thing? So it's how much cannabis do you need? You need enough. You need enough so that you are able to function the way you want to function and that you think is going to be beneficial to your lifestyle. Now that's also based off of the individual. There's genetic differences. There's all these things to consider. But, I genuinely feel that to simplify it, if people reduce the carbs, they eat clean fats, healthy proteins from animals and from sea creatures. And if they consume cannabis responsibly and they just take that combo, that they're going to be in a better state after than they were before.
Totally agree, man. I love it. And like I said, this is very, very unique. And I want to get into some of these details because you mentioned that you began to use like specific terpenes and other cannabinoids in your cooking to tailor your experience. And like you said, give you the desired effects.
Yeah.
And so how does that look in practice? Because this is like a whole new area for us. And I'm sure most of our listeners, like, where are you getting specific terpenes? Are you taking flower and cultivating it in a way to do that? And how does it look like when in the cooking? Is it only in oils? Or are there other things? Are you using it in spices? I want to hear all about that stuff.
Yeah, how you use it, right?
Yeah, yes. And of course, if you want to go into detail on which specific cannabinoids or terpenes or whichever that you're doing, that's good too. Because then it's like, okay, for me, for instance, I'll give you my issue is sleep. Yeah. I need to improve my sleep. So anyways, before I continue, I'll just let you take it from here.
All right. I can go down a huge rabbit hole here. So make sure you give me the 5-minute warning so I can wrap it up. But the first thing I'll say again, which is consumption determines function. So how you consume terpenes and how you consume cannabinoids are going to determine how they function. And a lot of people think that there's a difference between an indica and a sativa edible. Well, the reality of the situation is the minute amount of terpenes that are present in your edible, okay, are not going to alter the effects as it would through inhalation. So when you smoke an indica, which we refer to as a broadleaf marijuana, or what the industry, some science journals call indica afghanica. So these broadleaf, dense nugs that provoke those sedative effects. When you inhale that, you're getting this entourage effect of the cannabinoids and the terpenes and the other, hundreds of other compounds that are in there. And the metabolism of these things through your lungs is totally different than digesting them. Okay. So when you consume that indica or broadleaf type, it has sedative effects. Great. Well, you take that same thing, you make a cannabis oil or some ghee or tincture, and now you digest it, and your stomach totally alters the pharmacology of those terpenes, and then your liver does the exact same thing and turns them into different derivatives and different metabolites. At the end of the day, that small dose of an edible, the bioavailability was drastically reduced of the terpenes, drastically reduced of the cannabinoids, and you're not going to get that same entourage effect as you would through inhalation. So when I am cooking with terpenes, I am not trying to alter my effects. I'm not trying to.
Yeah, so interesting. You're just using the terpenes for them being terpenes.
Right.
It is as a chef, it's another ingredient in my pantry to enhance the experience of my food. So when I put a couple drops of limonene, which is the second most abundant terpene found in nature, found in all citrus, when I put a couple drops of that in a salad dressing, and when you taste the salad dressing, you get this like cooling citrusy type of mouth feel, but you don't taste lemon, but you can smell the aromatics of that lemon. That changes your experience. So how cool is it that you can add an ingredient that alters the experience and how you perceive the taste of it because of the aromatic changes, but you're not adding lemon juice. There's a big difference just cooking if you add lemon juice to something versus lemon zest or a combination of the two. So terpenes are like that. And my favorite terpene company is True Terpenes. Just Google True Terpenes, they'll pop up. I do cooking videos where I use all of their terpenes on my Twitch channel. And I don't do this from a medicinal standpoint. Now, when I'm talking about effects that I want to gain from cannabis, my focus is through digestion. I'm looking at the cannabinoid profile. When it comes to through inhalation, I'm looking at the cannabinoid and terpene profile. So if I find a cultivar or a genetics or a strain that everyone says, whatever it is, that has high myrcene and high linalool with a touch of beta caryophyllene, I know, not just from experience, but based off of research out there, that flower is going to provoke more sedative effects. Now, on the opposite side of the spectrum, if I find what people call, the sativa, which is technically indica subspecies indica, and sativa is really hemp, but that's a whole other rabbit hole that you can go down with the interpreting course or Trichome Institute. But on that side of the spectrum, when I find a strain that is high in pinene and high in limonene and terpenoline, I know that if I smoke one hit of that, my heart rate's going to go through the roof and I'm going to have a panic attack. and that very same thing could be the perfect combination of cannabinoids and terpenes that would be ideal for someone who maybe is depressed
or someone else.
Yeah, exactly. Or maybe not. Maybe someone who's the exact same type of whatever my issues are, and they smoke that, and that's perfect for them. So again, consumption determines function, and one of the big things that I can bring up, and this is kind of like my favorite stoner myth to debunk, that explains the whole idea of the effects through digestion. So there's this stoner myth that if you eat mango 45 minutes or an hour before you smoke, that the myrcene, a terpene predominantly found in cannabis, or various genetics, that the myrcene in the mango will make your high last longer and it'll be more enhanced because you ate mango. Okay, so I heard this and I was like, well, this doesn't make any sense. Let's dig deep. So I found a journal talking about the 20 most abundant mango varieties, and there's like a couple hundred of them. And they broke down the terpene, the chemical constituents, and mango had myrcene like way towards the bottom, and terpenoline, limonene, and carine, and a bunch of others were at the top. And the reason that people say that, the mango is going to do this is because the myrcene in the mango is supposed to open up the blood-brain barrier and allow in more THC. So, one, there's no data to back myrcene opening up the blood-brain barrier. None at all. I've looked everywhere. There is no reason that THC would need help from a terpene because it already is lipophilic, so it loves fat and it can easily cross the blood-brain barrier by itself. And then I look at the fact that there's hardly any myrcene in mango. So then I was researching about how terpenes are digested, and not only does your stomach actually alter the terpene, it'll actually take like one terpene and turn it into several others. But then your liver takes a hold of each one of those and then converts them into different metabolites. So the one terpene that you consume through mango, this myrcene, not only is there hardly any in there, but by the time it actually would or could possibly become systemic, you have such a low dose that isn't even doing anything. So this is where the placebo effect comes in, which is quite powerful. And it works, and it's very true. And the very thing that makes an indica edible sedative is the fact that it says indica on the label. And there's there's definitely effects driven terpene profiles and cannabinoid profiles and things like that with cannabis, but a lot of it is your set and setting, it's your expectation, and it's also how it was presented to you. And I think one of the most amazing things about cannabis as a medicine is that, yes, there are 100% scientifically proven medicinal benefits to this plant. But you also have a lot of people that have just been told it's a medicine, and they start consuming it and they feel better. So there's like the skeptic in me, the science side that's like, I want to know why it's making you feel better. And then there's like this hopeless romantic that's saying, who cares? You feel better. Like you're good to go, you know? So, and that I think happens a lot with food too. I'm sure you guys have researched with various diets where, you know, people think that they're getting better and they do. And it's like, well, gosh, how in the world is this person getting better eating Brussels sprouts and celery?
And the opposite has been demonstrated too. And the opposite has been demonstrated.
Exactly.
With the celery juice stuff and all that, like, I mean, I would just not to be specific, but I would lump that one into like fasting, because it's caloric restriction.
Exactly.
It's mimicking fasting. So you're basically fasting. So, you know, and then of course the removal of all the crap,
all the fiber.
You know, you felt great when you went vegan because you got rid of all the crap. Got rid of the crap. Unless you were like doing like grocery store, you know, junk food vegan, but I don't think you were doing that.
And it's caloric. The biggest thing is caloric restriction. I mean, above all, if you go you go vegan, you cut out a lot of people who go vegan. They seem to be anti-fat as well. So you're minimizing your caloric intake there, and you're also not eating like nutrient dense things. I mean, you look at 4 ounces of steak versus 4 ounces of celery. I mean,
can't compare.
A little bit different there, you know. So I mean, that's why I lost weight, and it's like you even get you dig deeper into like you know people who go vegan. They on a mild level are probably a lot of them are experiencing ketosis. I mean, why else if you're overweight?
For sure.
And then it's like you look at like my mom is a retired minister, and she used to do like Lent fasts and things like that. And she's like all euphoric and feeling the Lord and Savior. And here I am, like 20 years later. I'm like, hey, Mom, I don't know if that was Jesus as much as it was beta hydroxybutyrate. You know, so
that's hilarious.
There's definitely like a lot of interesting things about intermittent fasting and being in these altered states and having this placebo or this expectation of something, or the nocebo, which is the opposite, which can cause harm. But, at the end of the day, there's definitely science out there that says a ketogenic diet is healthy. And there's definitely science out there that says cannabis can help you with a whole plethora of issues. So
many things.
So why not combine them? And why not be responsible about it? And if it works for you, great. And if it doesn't mean it doesn't work. It just means that it didn't work for you.
Love it. I love that so much. And I can't wait to dig into like, you almost like opened up all these rabbit holes in our brains now. Like I can't wait to dig into the videos you do, like the cooking, because we love food. So we love to combine the cooking aspects of it.
Our sons have issues. Like one of them,
like
into
I want to
medical card and all of that. And if we could put stuff and cook stuff in, I mean, it
makes it easier because like, for example, like, exactly. Like they won't take stuff sometimes. Like they won't even tincture or whatever.
Yep.
So I love that cooking aspect of it. And so this has been so awesome. But before we close up, can you just tell us the story really quick of your experience on being crowned the High Times top cannabis chef? Because that's so cool. That's like the coolest thing.
We're both interested in hearing this story.
Yeah, well, it's not like one of those things where I'm like 14 years old and I'm like, when I grow up, I want to be this, because it didn't exist. So the way it worked, it was in March 2 years ago, I started doing social media content involving cannabis and cooking. And within that month on Instagram, someone from Boston on the other side of the globe, I was living in San Diego, not globe, but the country, tagged me in the first ever High Times Top Cannabis Chef competition sponsored by Magical Butter. Apply here. And I applied. And I included that I did competitions when I was in culinary school. I worked, apprenticed with a Olympic culinary chef, and I did some stuff through San Pellegrino and some local American Culinary Federation, ACF chapters in Pittsburgh where I was in school, and I had some success and it was all great. And I focused on the ketogenic cuisine, and they reviewed my application, and I was one of 8 to be selected. And in the competition, I was the only person there that wasn't involved with cannabis already. Like I didn't have an edible brand, I wasn't a grower, I wasn't already doing private cannabis dinners or anything like that. I was the noob. And it was I ended up doing 3 rounds as I progressed. It was 30 minutes each round, 4 identical plates, and it was mystery cuisine. So they basically pulled a style of cuisine out of a hat, and we had 30 minutes to start from there. What I ended up getting was Jamaican, Italian, and then French. They were the three that I went and I kept everything keto. Everything was infused with cannabis. We were allowed some secret ingredients to bring, so I brought fresh cannabis leaves and was able to I did a fried cannabis leaf, almost like a basil leaf you could do, or sage
garnish.
Yep, and I did like
it.
a little chiffonade of the leaves, and I was boiling this, not too keto, but it was the starch I had to work with. But I was boiling fingerling potatoes and cannabis leaves and pulling some of the flavor out, and everything was infused with various things. Like we had ghee, we had butter, MCT oil that was infused, honey, tincture, and I ended up going through and I humbly kicked ass.
That is awesome.
That is
man.
so awesome.
Yeah,
that is so cool. Because what was that show? We watched the show like a year ago or so.
Is it on Netflix?
Yeah. Do you know, Brandon? The one with
I don't know. There was a one on Netflix.
So there's
they were all
there's
marijuana chefs or
there's
something.
one on Netflix called Cooking on High, and
that one I think.
And I'm just gonna say no comment.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
It looks very, what's the word, like very studio-y, very
Well,
yeah.
Here's the thing, it's fun. Go for it, have some fun. I watched one episode and I honestly just felt that, from my perspective as someone who is looking to take this industry into what it's becoming, this normalized cannabis industry, just like corn, soy, and
especially
else.
There was that one guy who was on every episode.
Keep it more health conscious, of course. Oh yeah, the foods were crap. Yeah, the foods.
And they were kind of obnoxious. Yeah.
So
I get what you're saying.
I want to present this as less stonerific, and I can't get into details, but I may or may not have the opportunity to do that on a larger scale in the near future, which I'm pretty excited about.
We're super excited.
Fingers crossed there.
Fingers crossed.
But even, through my Instagram, which is at Chef Brandon Allen, that's where I do cannabis education videos, and I will be a little provocative at times and talk about things that the mainstream cannabis industry isn't comfortable discussing. And that's what I'm trying to do, is get people to realize that, you have to be responsible. It's not a cure-all. What happens in a petri dish may not happen to you. It's all about the individual. Your genetics play a role into how you can actually benefit or not from this plant. And things like dosing matters. Like your 10 milligrams of CBD only is doing jack unless you've got closer ratios of THC in there. And, I like talking about these things. So if anyone's looking for a little bit of maybe a fresher perspective on the cannabis industry, and, I have another group of like cannabis geeks. There's a little crew of us, and none of us are doctors, but we are all into the data and the science, and we go back and forth on a lot of things. So, I love the engagement through comments and people challenging the things that I post and being respectful to others that are doing the same. And, it's a cool little cannabis geek out community that will also love steaks and eggs,
That's awesome. I love it. Well, very cool, man. It's amazing that we got all this information in such a short period of time. I'm super excited that we did. We need to talk to you again in the future for sure, because there's so much more we want to cover.
Absolutely.
So maybe we'll do a part 2 soon.
Yeah, I would love for anyone who's listened to this to maybe they can send you guys some additional questions, and we can stay a little bit more focused on maybe 2 or 3 subjects throughout the podcast based off of what
to dig deeper.
Yeah, just to dive in, and especially if I have them ahead of time, because what I love to be able to do is provide references and resource where I'm getting these ideas from or where I'm getting the science from. So people can do the research on their own, but we'll provide that to them so we can be a little bit more prepared to dive into some specifics for sure.
Love
it,
that.
man.
And we'll put all of your links and where people can find you.
Chef Brandon Allen, chefbrandonallen.com.
We'll put this on the show notes.
Are there any that we're missing?
No, I mean, if you Google Chef Brandon Allen, everything will pop up. But Instagram is where I do most of my posting. And then through Twitch. Twitch.tv/Chef Brandon Allen is where I do my live cooking streams, which is also, it's live interactive with chat. So if anyone has any questions, next thing you know, I'm dicing up some onions and sauteing them, and I'm on a tangent about, CBD dosing. So it's fun.
I love it. Oh, we got to get in on that.
Oh yeah. Excellent.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm glad that y'all are aligned with good meats and good herb for sure.